What does real life with debt actually look like in China? Hello, everyone. My name is Zeng. I'm from China, and right now I'm about $84,000 in debt. What happened over the past few years completely changed my life. Before my payments started going overdue, I sent a text message to my older brother and my father. I didn't have the courage to call them, so texting felt easier. In the message, I briefly explained my situation. Of course, I didn't tell them the real amount of my debt. I just said that the money I owed wasn't too much, and that they didn't need to worry. But deep down, I knew that sooner or later they would find out anyway. In China, if you can't repay your debt on time, collection agencies may start calling your family members. They won't directly ask your family to pay the money for you, but contacting them creates pressure. Later, my family did offer to help me pay part of the debt, but I refused, because I knew that wouldn't really solve the problem. And more importantly, I didn't want to drag my family into my financial crisis. After I made that decision, strangely enough, I actually felt a little calmer. During the first 10 days after my payments became overdue, most of the calls I received were still from the bank. Their tone was usually polite. It felt more like a reminder. They would simply tell me that my payment was overdue and hope I could take care of it as soon as possible. But about 10 days later, things started to change. The people contacting me were no longer from the bank itself, but from third-party collection agencies working with them. Their tone became much tougher. Sometimes it even sounded a little threatening. The calls and text messages also became more and more frequent. At the worst point, I received more than 50 phone calls in a single day, and even more text messages.
要一手的信息，你需要实地去看到才能有真实的感受。第二呢，我也是希望这个形式可以更轻松一点，因为我们内容是偏那种严肃向的，什么财经、经济，一听就犯困。那财经有这么多很不确定的因素，它很难 manage，但是会经常有一些看起来方向呢是不同的，18点因素。 就希望能够跟不同领域的信息增量。那就除了我一个人来呢，我们可以找到这个。
At the beginning, I answered almost every call. I tried to explain my real situation. I told them that I wasn't refusing to repay the money. I just didn't have the ability to do it at that moment. But slowly I realized that these explanations didn't really mean anything. The more calls I answered, the more I felt that these conversations were pointless. They were just ordinary employees. If a customer repaid the debt, they would earn a commission. If the customer didn't pay, their job simply continued. For a period of time, the collection methods became even more aggressive. Some collectors didn't show much respect when they spoke to you. Sometimes they used provocative or sarcastic tones. A few times, I could clearly feel that they were trying to make me angry. Later, I slowly realized that this might also be part of their strategy. By constantly calling you and putting emotional pressure on you, they make you feel irritated, anxious, and exhausted. In that kind of state, some people may choose to borrow money from somewhere else just to repay the debt, simply to make those calls stop. There were also a few times when I had intense arguments with collectors. Some of the things they said were really excessive, and some of their behavior clearly crossed the line of what would be considered normal or compliant collection practices. But later I realized that continuing to argue with them didn't really help. If I kept answering these calls every day or replying to every message, I would have no way to live a normal life or focus on anything else. So about a year later, I made a decision. I stopped answering all collection calls, and I stopped replying to their messages. During that period of time, my life wasn't only about debt. I also broke up with my girlfriend. Part of the reason was definitely the pressure from debt. But to be honest, we already had some problems in our relationship. Sometimes when life gets difficult, many things seem to fall apart at the same time. That was probably the hardest period of my life. During that time, I rarely looked at myself in the mirror, and for a long time, I didn't take any photos of myself. I didn't want to see how miserable I looked. But one day, I still took a photo. It was probably the most miserable photo of myself I had ever taken. Maybe that's the real meaning of photography. Photos are not only meant to capture beautiful moments. Sometimes they also record the most real and most difficult moments in a person's life. Now, when I look back at that photo, I don't feel sad anymore. It simply recorded one of the hardest periods of my life. Debt doesn't disappear just because you stop answering the phone. Over the next few years, I received lawsuit notices from 3 different institutions. At the same time, some of my payment accounts were frozen several times. Sometimes they were restored, but after a while, they would be frozen again. Since then, I slowly developed a habit. I always keep some cash with me, because you never know when something unexpected might happen. Even today, I still keep that habit. The pandemic brought many things to a stop, my work included. During that time, I suddenly had a lot more free time than before, and I also had more time to think about my life. It was during that period that I started trying some new things. When God closes one door, sometimes He opens a window somewhere else. My life didn't suddenly change overnight, but little by little, things slowly started to get a bit better.